The weight of the silver locket felt heavier today. I ran my thumb over the worn filigree, a familiar ritual that usually brought a quiet comfort. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph of Robert, his smile as easy and genuine as it had been the day he'd placed this chain around my neck 46 years ago. We were standing in the empty shell of what would become our home, the air thick with the smell of sawdust and the limitless promise of our future. For our foundation, he'd said, his voice a low rumble against my ear. He wasn't just talking about the house. He was talking about us, about the family we would build, the life that would fill these rooms. Now, the rooms were filled only with silence and the ghosts of laughter. Robert was gone, and the foundation we'd built felt compromised. It felt like I was the only one left holding up the beams, and my arms were growing so very tired. I adjusted the collar of my silk blouse, a soft periwinkle blue that Robert had always said matched my eyes. It felt foolish, dressing up for a party I wasn't sure I wanted to attend. It was for Sarah, my daughter-in-law, her 40th birthday. A milestone. Mark, my son, had called it the event of the season. His voice had that familiar tone of manufactured excitement, the one he used when he was about to ask for something. In this case, it was a request for my famous 7-layer dip, and a subtle inquiry about whether I'd mind contributing a little extra to the champagne fund. As they were getting the really good stuff, I'd agreed, of course. I always did. For 17 years, since Mark had first brought Sarah home, a whirlwind of ambition and expensive taste, I had been agreeing. Agreeing to babysit on a moment's notice. Agreeing to help with the down payment on their first, then second, much larger house. Agreeing to fund summer camps, piano lessons, and an unfortunate foray into orthodontia for my granddaughter, Lily, that their insurance deemed cosmetic. I did it all without complaint, because that's what a grandmother, does. You shore up the foundations for your children. You provide. My resentment was a low, constant hum beneath the surface of my daily life, a note so persistent I'd almost stopped noticing it. It was only in quiet moments like this, staring at Robert's picture, that the hum would rise in pitch, becoming a sharp, keening sound in my own mind. He would have never stood for it. Robert had a keen eye for imbalance. He believed in generosity, but not in servitude. He would have seen the slow erosion of my spirit, the way my role had been whittled down from matriarch to benefactor, from mother to ATM. He would have said something. But I was not Robert. I was quieter, more inclined to keep the peace, to tell myself that this was just the price of staying involved in their lives, of getting to see Lily, the one pure, uncomplicated joy I had left. Lily, with her bright, curious eyes and a heart that hadn't yet learned the transactional nature of her parents' affection. She would call me just to tell me about a book she was reading, her voice tumbling with enthusiasm, and for a few precious minutes, the hum of resentment would fade completely, replaced by the warm glow of her love. It was a potent anesthetic. I picked up my purse from the hall table, the leather worn and soft. Inside, tucked into a side pocket, was the card for Sarah. It was a tasteful, artistic card with a watercolor of a garden. Inside, I'd written, "Wishing you a wonderful birthday, and a year filled with happiness." Beneath the sentiment, I'd tucked a check. The number on it had 4 digits. It was for the really good stuff, and then some. A gust of wind rattled the old windows, and for a moment, I felt a profound sense of loneliness, an ache that started deep in my chest. It was the feeling of being essential but unseen. I was the load-bearing wall in the architecture of their lives, completely necessary, but entirely taken for granted, painted over and ignored until a crack appeared. I smoothed my blouse one last time, took a deep breath to fortify myself for an evening of polite smiles and casual condescension, and glanced at my phone, checking for any last-minute messages before leaving. And there it was. A single, unread text from Mark. My thumb hovered over the notification, a strange, cold premonition washing over me. The screen glowed with a cool, impersonal light, the black letters stark against the white background. I had to read it twice, then a third time, my mind struggling to connect the words to the person who had sent them. It was Mark, my son, the boy I had held in my arms, whose fevers I had cooled with damp cloths, whose dreams I had nurtured with every ounce of my being. The message was brutally concise, stripped of any familial warmth, or even basic courtesy. Hey Mom. Quick heads up. It's Sarah's party, and it's mostly her friends, a younger crowd. She's a bit stressed and wants everything perfect, so she said it's probably better if you don't come tonight. Rain check soon. Love you. The love you was the cruelest part. A reflexive, meaningless little punctuation mark at the end of a sentence that had just surgically excised me from my own family. I sank onto the small bench by the door, the purse sliding from my lap and landing on the floor with a soft thud. The check for Sarah was still inside. A strange buzzing started in my ears, drowning out the sound of the wind outside. It wasn't a hum of resentment anymore, it was the shriek of a system failure. I stared at the phone, at the casual cruelty of it. A younger crowd, I was 68, not 108. I had more life and vitality in my little finger than most of Sarah's vapid, social climbing friends. She's a bit stressed. The implication hung heavy in the air, that my very presence was a source of stress, an imperfection in her curated display of a perfect life. My mind replayed the phone call from 2 days prior. Mark's voice, oozing with false charm. It's going to be great, Mom. We'd love for you to be there. Had he been lying then, or had Sarah's decree come down since? Did it even matter? The result was the same. I was not wanted. My role was to provide the funds, the dip, the invisible support, and then quietly disappear when the curtain went up. My gaze drifted from the phone to the hallway wall, where a gallery of framed photographs chronicled our family's life. There was Mark's college graduation, his grin wide, his arms slung around my shoulders. I had paid for that cap and gown, for the tuition, for the ridiculously expensive apartment he'd insisted he needed to focus on his studies. There was his wedding day. Sarah, radiant in a dress that cost more than my first car, beaming at him. I remembered the quiet conversation a week before the wedding, when a tearful Sarah had confessed the venue had unexpectedly raised their prices. I had written the check that bridged the gap, patting her hand and telling her it was my pleasure, that nothing was too much for my boy's happiness. And standing here now, uninvited to her 40th birthday party, I finally understood. It wasn't my presence they valued, it was my presence. I was a resource, not a relative. The buzzing in my ears began to subside, replaced by a profound and chilling silence. It was the silence of a connection finally and irrevocably severed. The years of self-sacrifice, of biting my tongue, of writing check after check while telling myself it was for love, all of it collapsed in on itself under the weight of that single, dismissive text message. The foundation Robert and I had built hadn't been compromised, it had been systematically demolished, and I had been handing them the sledgehammer. I stood up from the bench, my movements stiff. I picked up my purse, my hand closing around the cool leather. I walked back into the living room, the periwinkle blouse feeling like a costume for a play I was no longer a part of. I sat down in Robert's old armchair, its worn fabric a familiar comfort against my back. And I let myself remember. Not the sanitized, Hallmark card versions of memories I usually clung to, but the real ones, the ones with sharp edges and uncomfortable truths. The dam of denial I had so carefully constructed over the years didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces. The flood of memory was overwhelming, but for the first time, I didn't try to swim against it. I let it carry me back to the beginning of the end. The first major withdrawal from the Bank of Eleanor happened 12 years ago. Mark and a very pregnant Sarah were sitting on my sofa, the same one I was sitting on now, though it was less faded then. They had brought over a glossy brochure for a new housing development called Willow Creek Estates. The houses were beautiful, all beige siding and sprawling lawns, with two-car garages and kitchens designed for entertaining. They were also catastrophically expensive. "We found it, Mom," Mark had said, his eyes shining. "The perfect place to raise a family. A forever home." Sarah had placed a hand on her swelling belly and smiled a beatific smile. "It's got the best school district. And a community pool. It's for the baby, really, the baby." The magic word. The emotional leverage they had been unknowingly honing since conception. They laid out their finances on my coffee table, a confusing mess of spreadsheets and optimistic projections. The conclusion was inescapable: they were short. They were short by $150,000 for the down payment. I remember the silence that followed their presentation. I looked at my son, saw the hope in his face, and then at Sarah, who was looking at me with an expression of such earnest pleading it felt staged. "We'd consider it a loan, of course," Mark said quickly, sensing my hesitation. "We'll draw up a proper agreement. We'll pay you back, with interest, as soon as we are on our feet." Sarah chimed in. "We'd be lost without you, Eleanor. You're our rock, our rock." It sounded so solid, so supportive. It took me years to understand that rocks are meant to be stood upon, taken for granted, their strength assumed. I thought of the money Robert and I had painstakingly saved, the investments we'd made. It was our security, the safety net we'd woven for our own old age. But looking at my son's face, at the promise of my first grandchild, the future felt less important than their present. So I agreed. We went to a lawyer, my idea, a small, futile attempt at prudence, and drew up a simple promissory note. It outlined a repayment schedule to begin after 5 years, giving them time to get on their feet. They signed it with flourishing, grateful signatures. I transferred the money the next day. $150,000. I could still see the number on the bank confirmation slip. 1-5-0-0-0-0. The first 5 years came and went. Lily was born, a perfect, beautiful child who became the center of my universe. Willow Creek Estates was everything they'd dreamed of. They hosted barbecues and pool parties. Sarah quit her job to be a full-time mother, a decision I supported, even as I quietly transferred money to their account each month to cover the loss of her income. The repayment date for the loan arrived, and I waited. A week passed. Then a month. I finally brought it up, gently, during a Sunday dinner. "Oh, that," Mark had laughed, waving his fork dismissively. "Mom, come on. We are still getting on our feet. The mortgage is killing us, and Lily's preschool is basically a second mortgage," Sarah had added, with a tight smile. "We always thought of it more as an early inheritance, you know. A gift? To help us build our future." I remember the feeling of cold shock, the way the mashed potatoes turned to paste in my mouth. A gift? They had unilaterally, without discussion, recategorized my life savings as a gift. The promissory note, tucked away in my safe deposit box, suddenly felt like a joke. I didn't push it. I told myself it was for Lily. I told myself a fight wasn't worth it. I chose peace over principle. What I see now, sitting in Robert's chair with my son's cruel text burning a hole in my phone, is that I hadn't chosen peace. I had chosen subjugation. I had taught them that my money, my boundaries, my feelings, were all negotiable. It was a lesson they had learned all too well. That $150,000 wasn't a single, catastrophic event. It was the earthquake that destabilized the entire structure, making it vulnerable to the relentless aftershocks that followed. The big emergencies became a predictable pattern. Mark's car unexpectedly died right before a major presentation at work. A new, German-engineered sedan was apparently the only solution. The check I wrote was for $5,000, to help with the down payment. Then Sarah's laptop, containing all her freelance design work, was fried by a power surge. A top-of-the-line replacement was essential for her career. a career that seemed to generate more social media posts than actual income. That was another 3,000. These weren't requests, they were declarations of crisis, delivered with a sense of urgency that left no room for questions. My role was not to question, but to solve. To write the check. To make the problem go away. I became the family's fourth emergency service, just a phone call away. The small cuts were more insidious, a slow, steady bleeding of my resources. It was the weekly groceries I'd buy for them, always stocking their pantry with organic snacks for Lily and expensive imported cheeses for Sarah. "You're a lifesaver, Mom," Mark would say as I loaded the bags onto their granite countertop, never once offering to pay. It was the family vacations. They'd show me glossy brochures for Disney World or a Caribbean cruise. "We want to make memories with Lily," Sarah would say, her eyes wistful. "But it's just so expensive," the unspoken request hung in the air until I filled it. "Let me help," I'd say. "It's my treat. For my grandbaby," and so I paid. I paid for flights, for hotels with lazy rivers, for character breakfasts and princess dresses. I have a photo album filled with these memories. In every picture, Mark and Sarah are tan and smiling, Lily is ecstatic, and I am nowhere to be seen. I was never invited. I was the sponsor, not a participant. My name was on the credit card statement, but not on the plane ticket. The most bitter irony was the stark contrast between their life and mine. They lived in their sprawling 3,500 square foot house in Willow Creek, while I remained in the modest 1,600 square foot home Robert and I had bought 46 years ago. They drove new cars with heated seats and state-of-the-art sound systems. I drove a 10-year-old Honda, reliable and paid for. Sarah's closet overflowed with designer labels, clothes she'd wear once for an Instagram photo, while my wardrobe consisted of classic, well-made pieces I'd owned for years. I wasn't a miser. I was comfortable. But I was frugal, a habit ingrained by parents who had lived through the Depression. I believed in saving, in planning, in living within one's means. My son and his wife believed in living within my means. They saw my prudence not as a virtue to be emulated, but as a surplus to be exploited. My careful savings were not a testament to a life of hard work and delayed gratification, they were a slush fund for their whims. Staring at the text on my phone, the phrase "a younger crowd" echoed in my mind with a new, sardonic meaning. Of course they wanted a younger crowd. Younger people didn't have a 17-year history of their financial hypocrisy. Younger people wouldn't look at Sarah's new diamond tennis bracelet. The one she'd casually mentioned was an early birthday present from Mark, and wonder which of my retirement accounts had paid for it. I wasn't just an unwanted guest. I was a witness. And my presence, it seemed, was a threat to the illusion they had so carefully constructed with my money. Just as the cold resolve began to settle deep in my bones, my phone buzzed again. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought it was Mark, perhaps with a follow-up text, a pathetic attempt at damage control. But the screen showed Lily's name, accompanied by a picture of her grinning, a gap where her two front teeth used to be. A wave of love, so fierce and pure it almost brought me to my knees, washed away the icy bitterness. This was the one good thing, the one relationship that wasn't tainted. I answered on the second ring, forcing a warmth into my voice that I did not feel. "Hi, sweet pea. What are you up to?" Her voice, small and clear, came through the speaker. "Grandma. Why aren't you here? Daddy said you weren't coming." Her question was a tiny, innocent dagger to the heart. "Oh, honey. I wasn't feeling my best tonight. I thought it was better to rest." The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. I hated lying to her. There was a pause, and I could hear the thumping bass of party music in the background. "Oh," she said, her voice dropping. "I was waiting for you. I wanted to show you my new dress." I closed my eyes, picturing her in whatever little confection Sarah had picked out. "I bet you look beautiful, my love." Like a princess, another pause, longer this time. Then she whispered, her voice so low I could barely hear her over the music. Mommy's mad, my heart clenched. Mad? Why is she mad, sweetie? I could hear her take a little breath, the sound of a child sharing a secret. She was talking to Daddy in the kitchen. She said she didn't want you here to cast a pall over the party. She said your martyr act was exhausting and she just wanted one night where she didn't have to feel guilty about having nice things appall. My presence cast a pall. The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't that I was too old, or that I would cramp their style. It was that my quiet, frugal existence was a silent judgment on their extravagance. My self-sacrifice wasn't a gift to them, it was an annoyance, a burden. I didn't make them feel grateful, I made them feel guilty. And Daddy said, Lily hesitated. He said, I know, I'll handle it. She'll get over it, she always does. He'll handle it. She'll get over it. She always does. The casual, chilling certainty in my son's voice, relayed through the innocent mouth of my granddaughter, was the final nail in the coffin of my denial. They weren't just thoughtless, they were strategic. They had discussed it. They had weighed my feelings against Sarah's desire for a guilt-free party, and my feelings had lost. They had banked on my love, on my tendency to forgive, on my long-established pattern of getting over it. I felt a strange, terrifying calm descend upon me. It was the calm of a ship that has weathered a hurricane, and is now floating in the eerily still waters of the eye of the storm. Lily, I said, my voice steady, almost serene. Thank you for telling me, sweet pea. That was very brave of you. Are you okay, Grandma? I am now, darling, I said, and it was the truest thing I had said all day. I am perfectly okay. Now you go and have some fun. I love you very much. I love you too, Grandma. She hung up, and I was left in the silence of my living room, the echo of her words ringing in my ears. She'll get over it, she always does. A cold smile touched my lips. No. Not this time. This time was different. This time, I wasn't going to get over it. I was going to get even. The transformation from heartbroken mother to resolute strategist was surprisingly swift. The grief and shock had burned away like a morning fog, leaving behind a landscape of stark, crystalline clarity. I walked from the living room to the small study Robert had built off the kitchen. It was my sanctuary, a room of order and logic. The walls were lined with books, the desk was a large, solid piece of oak, and my financial records were filed away with meticulous precision in a heavy, fireproof cabinet. For years, I had managed our investments, paid our bills, and planned our future from this very desk. After Robert died, I had continued the practice, but my focus had shifted from securing our future to funding theirs. Now, I was reclaiming this space, and my power, for myself. I sat down in the worn leather chair, the cool material a comfort against my back, and I turned on the old brass lamp. The warm pool of light illuminated the polished surface of the desk, and in that circle of light, I felt a sense of control I hadn't felt in years. My first action was not one of anger, but of accounting. I opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, and pulled out a thick accordion file labeled Mark and Sarah Personal. Inside was a 17-year history of my generosity. I began to lay the documents out on the desk, one by one, under the lamplight. First, the original promissory note for the $150,000, their signatures looking like a cruel joke now. Then, the carbon copies of checks, 4 cars, 4 laptops, 4 emergencies, real and imagined. I found the credit card statements detailing the vacations, the theme park tickets, the overpriced resort fees. I found receipts for private school tuition payments, each one a testament to my love for Lily, a love they had weaponized. I started a list on a fresh sheet of legal paper. I wrote with a steady hand, my pen scratching against the paper in the quiet room. The numbers piled up, one after another. It was a staggering sum, a monument to my own willful blindness. It was more than an accounting of money, it was an inventory of my life, of my sacrifices. Each number represented a time I had put their wants before my needs, their comfort before my own security. Seeing it all laid out, in black and white, was not painful. It was liberating. The numbers did not lie. They did not make excuses. They simply stated the facts. And the facts were that I had given them a fortune, and in return, they had given me a text message telling me I wasn't welcome at a party. The transaction was grotesquely imbalanced. It was time to correct the ledger. With the list complete, I picked up the phone. My first call was not to a lawyer, but to my financial advisor, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Janice whom I had worked with for 20 years. "Janice," I said, my voice clear and firm. "It's Eleanor Vance. I need to make some significant changes to my portfolio and my estate plan." Immediately, I could hear the surprise in her voice. "Eleanor? Of course. Is everything all right?" "Everything," I said, a smile touching my lips, "is about to be." I instructed her to liquidate a specific set of mutual funds, the ones I had always mentally earmarked as Mark's inheritance, and to transfer the cash into a new, high-yield savings account under my name only. Then came the bigger move. I want to restructure my will. The house is to be placed in a trust for my granddaughter, Lily Vance. The trust will be managed by you, and the funds are to be used exclusively for her education, and to provide her with a down payment for her own home when she turns 30. Not a penny is to go to her parents. The remainder of my estate, upon my death, is to be divided equally between the National Humane Society and Doctors Without Borders. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Eleanor," Janice said carefully, "this is a very significant change, I know," I replied. "It's long overdue." My final instruction was to recommend a lawyer. A bulldog. Not a gentle family lawyer, but a litigator who specialized in contractual disputes. She gave me a name. My second call was to him. The plan was no longer just a feeling, it was in motion. The next morning, I woke up before the dawn, a feeling of purpose humming through my veins. The melancholy that had been my constant companion for years was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, watching the sky lighten from bruised purple to a soft, hopeful pink. I felt like I was seeing the world in color for the first time in a long time. My first call of the day was to the lawyer Janice had recommended, a Mr. David Chen. His voice was brisk and professional. I explained the situation calmly and factually, starting with the $150,000 promissory note and ending with the text message from my son. I emailed him a scanned copy of the signed agreement. He was quiet for a moment after I finished. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice devoid of pity but full of professional interest, "this is an ironclad agreement. Their failure to adhere to the repayment schedule constitutes a clear breach of contract." "We can send a demand letter today, please do," I said. "I also want you to draft letters regarding several other substantial sums which, while not under formal contract, were explicitly referred to as loans in written correspondence." "I have the emails and text messages, send them over," he said, a hint of predatory glee in his voice. "We'll include them in our demand. It establishes a clear pattern." My next call was to a realtor, a woman who had sold a neighbor's house a few months back. I told her I wanted to sell my home. "I'm looking to downsize," I explained. "Something modern, with a view. A condo downtown, perhaps. Low maintenance. Something just for me." She was enthusiastic, promising to come by that afternoon with a market analysis. As I hung up, my eyes fell on the gallery of family photos in the hall. For years, they had been a source of bittersweet nostalgia. Now, they looked like evidence from a crime scene. I spent the next hour taking them down, one by one. The graduation photo, the wedding portrait, the posed family pictures where everyone was smiling for the camera, but not for each other. I didn't smash them or tear them. I simply removed them from their frames, stacked them neatly, and placed them in a box. I left only one frame on the wall, a small, candid snapshot of Robert and me on a beach in Cape Cod, our faces weathered by the sun, laughing. That was my family. The rest was just an obligation I had finally been freed from. When the realtor arrived, the walls were bare, clean, and ready for a new life. As she walked through the house, complimenting its good bones and charming details, I didn't feel a pang of sadness. I felt the exhilarating lightness of letting go. This house wasn't my foundation anymore. I was my own foundation. And I was building something new. The call came 3 days later. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was packing books into boxes when my phone rang, displaying Mark's name. I felt a flicker of something, not anxiety, but a kind of detached curiosity. I let it ring 4 times before answering, a small but satisfying assertion of control. "Hello, Mark," I said, my voice neutral. "Mom? What is going on?" He didn't sound angry, not yet. He sounded bewildered, like a man who had woken up to find the laws of physics had been suspended. "I just got a letter from some lawyer. Chen, or something. It's talking about the down payment for the house. It says we owe you $150,000 plus interest. This has to be some kind of mistake, right? Did you hire this guy for something else, and he got his files mixed up?" The condescension in his voice was thick. The assumption that I, his simple-minded mother, couldn't possibly have initiated such an action on my own. It was almost comical. "No, Mark," I said calmly, placing another book in the box. "There's no mistake. Mr. Chen is my lawyer, and the letter is accurate." I could hear his sharp intake of breath. The confusion was rapidly curdling into disbelief. "What are you talking about? That was a gift. We talked about this years ago." "No, Mark, we didn't talk about it. You and Sarah informed me that you had decided it was a gift. I simply chose not to argue at the time. We signed a legal document, a promissory note. Do you remember? It's a loan, and it is long past due." I heard fumbling on his end, the sound of papers rustling. He had obviously dug out the letter. "This is insane. It also mentions my car. And some vacation from 6 years ago. Mom, what has gotten into you? Are you feeling okay? Is this about the party?" The last question was tentative, a dawning horror in his voice. He knew. He knew exactly what this was about. "The party," I said, my voice as level as a frozen lake, "was simply the catalyst, Mark. It was the moment I realized that my role in your life has a price tag, but no value. For 17 years, I have been your solution, your safety net, your silent partner. I funded a lifestyle you couldn't afford, and I did it out of love. But I see now that the love was only flowing in one direction." His voice rose, laced with panic. "That's not true. We love you. This is crazy. We can't pay this. We don't have this kind of money. You'll ruin us. You'll destroy our family." The word family hung in the air between us, a hollow, meaningless shell. "You and Sarah seem to have a very flexible definition of that word," I said quietly. "One that includes my bank account, but excludes my presence. As for the money, you'll have to figure that out. You're adults. It's time you stood on your own 2 feet, without using my back as a stepping stone." There was a choked, sputtering sound, and then another voice came on the line. Harsher, sharper. It was Sarah. "Eleanor, what in God's name do you think you're doing?" Sarah's voice was dripping with venom. The bewildered panic of her husband was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated rage. "You can't do this," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you. The sheer audacity of that statement almost made me laugh. Everything you've done for me, I repeated, my voice dangerously soft. Please, Sarah, enlighten me. What is it, exactly, that you have done for me? There was a sputtering silence on the other end. She was so used to being on the offensive, so accustomed to framing her wants as needs, that my simple question had completely disarmed her. We give you a family. We let you be a part of Lily's life, she finally managed, her voice shaking with indignation. Let me, I said. You let me be a grandmother. As if it's a privilege you bestow upon me, instead of a natural bond of love. A bond, I might add, that you have used as leverage to get what you want time and time again. Let's be very clear, Sarah. My relationship with Lily is the only authentic thing in this entire mess. And if you even think about trying to poison that, or keep her from me, be assured that Mr. Chen has already prepared for that possibility. Grandparents have rights, you know. The threat, veiled but potent, hit its mark. Her tone shifted instantly from rage to a kind of wheedling, manipulative desperation. Eleanor, listen. We are sorry about the party. It was a misunderstanding. I was just so stressed, I wasn't thinking clearly. Of course we want you in our lives. We love you. This is just, it's a shocking way to handle a little hurt feeling, a little hurt feeling. She had reduced 17 years of exploitation and a final, brutal act of exclusion to a little hurt feeling. That was the moment I knew there was nothing left to salvage. There was no remorse, only fear of consequences. This isn't about my feelings, Sarah, I said, my voice cold and final. Not anymore. This is about mathematics. It's about balancing the books. You have lived a life you did not earn, on my money. And I am calling in the debt. You wanted a younger crowd at your party, one free from the pall of my presence. Well, you're about to have a life free from the burden of my financial support. You should be thrilled. You're a cruel, selfish old woman, she shrieked, her mask of civility completely obliterated. You'd see your own son, your only grandchild, out on the street out of spite. No, I said calmly. I am ensuring my only grandchild has a future that isn't dependent on the whims of two financially irresponsible people. Her trust fund is secure. You, on the other hand, will have to sell the house. I imagine you'll still have a fair bit of equity left after you pay me back. It won't be Willow Creek, but I'm sure you'll manage. People do it every day. It's called living within your means. I could hear Mark in the background, his voice a low, pleading murmur. But Sarah was beyond reason. She was just screaming now, a torrent of insults and accusations. I held the phone away from my ear, listening to the sound not as words, but as noise. The death rattle of an entitlement that had just been starved of its oxygen. When she finally paused to take a breath, I brought the phone back to my mouth. My lawyer has all the necessary documentation. He will be in touch with yours. Do not contact me directly again, and with that, I ended the call. I didn't slam the phone down. I pressed the red icon on the screen with a steady finger, and the silence that filled my house was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of freedom. 6 months have passed. The old house, the one Robert and I filled with so much love and hope, is sold. I drove by it once, a few weeks after the closing. A new family was moving in, a young couple with a toddler. They were laughing as they carried a box up the front walk. I felt a pang, not of loss, but of a strange, sweet nostalgia for a chapter that was truly, finally closed. I wish them well. I hope they fill those rooms with a more honest kind of love than the one that had occupied them last. My new home is a condo on the 17th floor of a sleek, modern building downtown. The entire west wall is glass, and every evening, I watch the sun set over the city, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and pink. The view is vast and limitless, a perfect reflection of how I feel. The space is mine. Every piece of furniture, every book on the shelf, every piece of art on the wall, was chosen by me, for me. It is a sanctuary I built for myself. The legal battle was ugly, but short. Faced with the undeniable proof of the promissory note, and the mountain of supporting evidence, Mark and Sarah had no choice. They sold the house in Willow Creek. After paying me the $150,000 plus the accrued interest, and settling some of their other debts, they had enough left to rent a small townhouse in a less fashionable suburb. I hear from mutual acquaintances that Mark has taken on a second job, and Sarah is now working full-time. They are, for the first time in their adult lives, supporting themselves. I take no pleasure in their struggle, but I feel no guilt either. It is the natural consequence of their own choices. The money they paid me sits in a high-yield account, untouched. It is my travel fund. My Italy fund. My do whatever I want fund. My relationship with Lily is stronger than ever. At first, Sarah tried to use her as a pawn, cancelling our weekly visits, refusing to let her answer my calls. But my lawyer, Mr. Chen, sent a single, sharply worded letter reminding them of my legal rights, and they quickly relented. I see Lily every weekend now. I pick her up, and we explore the city. We go to museums, to parks, to little cafes where we share pastries and talk for hours. I am teaching her about art, about history, about finance. I am teaching her what it means to be a strong, independent woman. She never speaks of what happened, but there is a new understanding in her eyes. She sees me, truly sees me, not as a doting, passive grandmother, but as a person with her own life, her own strength. The trust fund I established for her is growing. She will never have to plead for a down payment. She will never have to compromise her dignity for a sense of security. That is the greatest gift I could ever give her. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, I take out the silver locket. I look at Robert's smiling face, and I talk to him. I tell him about my new life, about the city lights, about the trip to Tuscany I'm planning for the spring. I tell him how I finally learned to stand up for the foundation we built together, and for myself. There is no sadness in these conversations anymore, no lingering resentment. Just a quiet, profound peace. That night, the night of the text message, felt like an ending. I thought my world was collapsing. But I was wrong. It wasn't an ending. It was a demolition. It was the violent, necessary clearing of a rotten structure to make way for something new. Something strong. Something true. It was the beginning of my life.